So hello everybody and welcome to today's special edition call with the 21-day New You program. This is Mental Toughness, Part 3, Motivation with Marni Jennjahn. So with that, Marni, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Zach. So this is part 3 of our mental toughness subject. So I do, again, have the PowerPoint, of course, for the content, and then we can have, any questions at the end. So hopefully you'll be able to see that as I get ready to share my screen. But the interesting thing is, we started with concentration and concentration and attentional focus. And then we moved on to confidence, and today is motivation. So those are all things that obviously we all need to have, want to have had more of at some points in our life than others. And so I think at this point, we don't really know how much confidence plays a role in what we're dealing with right now as a country, but it really does. And so I think that hopefully this will speak to you in a way that, is very useful. So I hope that this is something that you will find will be of much use to you in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share. Oh, it's saying host disabled again, Zach.
Okay, all right. Let me see if I can get this quickly switched. Okay, go ahead and try now.
Okay, there we go. Gotta get back on my video. That's a portion that we learned. You can still see me. Okay. So we're, like I said, the same subject again, mental toughness. Part 3 is on motivation. So what we're going to talk about today is how we assess and increase our commitment, how we increase intrinsic motivation, and I'll define that so that you understand what that means, goal setting and identifying different types of goals, and then the principles of goal setting. Okay, and some of you may have been through this before, but so some of it may be review, but it's always good to review things at a different point in your life because you're facing different challenges. So we'll see how this works for you today. So motivation and mental toughness, and I found some nice little icons for this one. Time plus effort equals commitment. So if we put in the time, put in the effort, then hopefully we can get to that yes. And I love the guy, pushing the boulder up the hill. That's a good Asheville type of thing, right? All right, so we did a little bit of this morning with our poll. So you have the decisional balance sheet of, kind of the thumbs up or the thumbs down, right? Your pros versus your cons is pretty much what that means. And when we do that, I don't know how many of you do that you weigh the pros and the cons and you actually write it out. But the idea is that you actually put it in written form, that you put, on your paper pros, but then you put what are the pros of not changing this, whatever it is that you're dealing with. List 1 to 3 positive consequences of not making the change. Okay. And then you go to the pros of changing, the positive consequences of making that change. Okay, so that's your pros. You've got 2 parts, pros of not changing and pros of changing, whatever that situation is. And then, of course, on the other side, you've got the cons. So that's your thumbs down, and that's not changing. It's the same thing again. Negative consequences of not changing. What would that be of that proposed change? And then changing it. The negative consequences of changing that proposed change. Okay, so you've got the pros on one side, cons on the other, the not changing and changing of each portion of that. Okay, so I think, like I said, it's really important that you write it down. I know that Whitney had mentioned that anytime you write something down, it really, sticks in your brain a little bit more than it would if you just did it verbally or just did it in your head. So that's something that really spoke to me when I heard her say that. So let me back up here just a second and talk about how motivation works for people that have been inventors. Okay, for instance, Thomas Edison, we know his story. And someone asked him, how did it feel? How were you able to stay motivated after you failed 10,000 times? And he said, quote, "I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found out 10,000 ways that it didn't work." So that really is powerful, right? That he can look at that objectively enough to understand that as a scientist, as an inventor, he figured out, okay, that didn't work, moving on. That didn't work, moving on. He just kept going forward, kept him motivated to keep going. Whereas, for some of us, the failure, it beats us down. So that's the thing that struck me the most, is that, we have to sometimes, in certain situations that are very challenging, stay motivated when we don't have anything that's motivating us, right? So there's also a commitment self-help assessment that I can send to you if you're interested in knowing what your commitment level is for your certain situation. So that's something that, I found helpful, and I think it's, interesting to do on a maybe yearly basis, or, maybe every 5 years, just kind of check in to see what your commitment level is, especially when we're talking about exercise programs or nutrition programs or anything like that, that you're actually making a decision to change something in your life for a very positive, in a very positive way. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So typically our type of motivation is extrinsic, meaning that we perform to receive a reward separate from the activity. In other words, we get money for, performing our job. We get prestige or an award for, performing something better than anyone else. We get a trophy, for winning the Super Bowl. It's, that type of thing, where it's an extrinsic type of motivation. So what we want to talk about is intrinsic motivation, because that is more powerful and works better for most people. So that's when you perform an activity for the satisfaction of the activity itself. So it's not receiving anything for it. So in other words, say the paying it forward, that you were in the drive-through line and you decided, hey, I'm going to pay for the person behind me. So that's, one of those motivation type of things that you would do, but that person's not going to thank you because you're going to be gone by the time they get up there and realize that you paid for their meal, right? So it's something that, it comes from the heart, typically, is the way that works. So then I'll share with you the positive outcomes of your intrinsic motivation would be creativity. We definitely become more creative when it's something that we care deeply about. We're more persistent because it's something we care deeply about. It increases our energy because we're excited about it, right? Gives us autonomy. It increases your interest in that activity, hopefully. And then it gives you an enhanced sense of competence. So, you feel like, hey, I did that, so I can move on and do a little bit more. Like we talk about in exercise. Well, if you did 2 pounds for about a month and maybe it's gotten easier, maybe you can switch up to 3 pounds for one set and see if that, works for you. So then that way you're continuing to gain strength and continuing to feel better and, get stronger in your body. So that's always important. So the other thing is to think about how you have been rewarded in the past, what worked for you and what didn't. And so here's some strategies for enhancing your motivation, your intrinsic motivation. Positive feedback, of course, that's something that, Zach and I love getting that feedback, because that, keeps us going and keeps us giving you what you need, providing for input or seeking input. So Zach does that with me. He has me give him input about, the programs and the things that we're doing. And that's really important. That makes me feel like, oh, wow, I'm a part of the team. That makes a big difference. Successful experiences. So if you've been successful doing something, like I've been in, fitness for almost 25 years, you can pull back, you can pull from experiences you've had in the past, what was successful. Though this worked for me, I think we'll try this. And then seeking enjoyable activities. That's always the best, right? Because if it's something you enjoy, it doesn't feel like a workout. It doesn't feel like, something we have to do the workout. Ugh, I know my clients used to tell me the best part of the workout was when it was over. And I was like, well, I hope not. I hope it wasn't that horrible, that you felt like that was the best part of it. So it has to be enjoyable. It has to be something that you're not just feeling, oh, I just don't want to do that today. So it's definitely a very personal thing.
Marni?
Yes.
And to me, positive feedback is more extrinsic than intrinsic. So help me understand when it's intrinsic versus extrinsic.
I think what it's referring to is the fact that you would receive that positive feedback. Yes, that is an extrinsic because somebody is giving it to you, but the feeling that you get from it is more of an intrinsic. So I think that's what you asked.
Yeah, I'm trying to separate it out.
Right. Yeah, there is a fine line there. You're right. Yep, so then moving on to goal setting. So obviously you've seen these different types of goals that you can set for yourself, which the first is objective, which is the measurable level of performance or proficiency. Okay, so that's pretty easy to measure, right? Objective, goal, measured level, like I'm going to jog 5 miles and next week I'm going to jog 6 miles. That's an objective measurable goal. Okay. Subjective would be aiming at the desired result based on feelings or opinions. So that would be, well, I feel better when I exercise. So that's more subjective, right? Because that's how you feel about it. An outcome would be focusing on the outcome of the event or competition. So I won the race, right? That's your outcome goal. If that's your goal to win, then that would be, a way to set the goal. Performance goal would be focusing on previous performance. So say, for instance, you ran the race at, I know that I did a 5K walk in Asheville a couple of years, 4 years ago, and did it in 45 minutes. So my goal the next year was to do it in 40 minutes. Or the 2 years later was 40 minutes because we did our meetings every 2 years in Asheville. And so I beat my goal. So I made my performance goal based on the previous performance. So that was awesome. My husband was a big pusher for that. He was like, come on, you can do it. Of course, training in Florida for something that's in North Carolina is so much different when you're sea level and you're no hills versus obviously hills and 2,000, plus feet of elevation makes a big difference. And cooler too, which cooler actually helped. And then process goal. So that would be focusing on what needs to be done to meet your performance goal. So if there's a process in trying to meet that goal, like the golfer that needs to work on his sand shots, that sort of thing, that you would actually get in there and work on that to improve your overall performance. Okay. So hopefully that helps to break that down a little bit better for you as far as goal setting. Lots of different types of goals. Okay, so now we move on to the principles of goal setting, which I think a lot of us have seen this before. SMART, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Okay, and the interesting part about that is it can apply to almost anything. Okay, so this doesn't necessarily have to be exercise or program, you know, or nutrition program or brain health or energy or any of that. It could be just a personal goal that you have for whatever it is, for that you want to save up to travel, you know, to Europe, or you want to make sure that you're, you know, in good enough shape to go see your granddaughter or niece or whoever graduate or get married or whatever it is, you know, setting that goal ahead of time and making sure that you can set the steps ahead of it for the motivation to be able to meet it is the most important thing, right? Okay, so a couple of things to add to the SMART would be the A would be action oriented as well as attainable. Okay, because that's important. That you want to make sure that you put some sort of action in there that you have met. Yeah, I think so. And then I would add an S at the end, SMARTS, and make it self-determined. In other words, you decided what it was. Somebody else didn't decide that for you. I know a lot of times it's, you know, husband wants you to lose 10 pounds, or, you know, wife wants husband to you know, do more yard work, you know, or whatever it is. Make sure that it's you that's doing it, because you're the one that's getting the benefit as well as everybody else, obviously. But I think that that's so important to make sure you set that goal yourself. And then, of course, to break it down. So important to break it down into smaller parts: daily, weekly, monthly, yearly goals. Make a checklist, write it down, and then you're checking it off. Not necessarily that, I don't want you to think that, oh yeah, I'm checking it off. You know, that's not necessarily the goal. The goal is to make sure that you have set it down on paper so that you can remember what it is, first of all, because we have lots of things going on in our minds and in our lives. Making sure that you've written it down so that you can refer back to it and say, oh, well, last year I did that, so this year I should do this. So it's something that you can build on. And if you didn't complete the goal, okay, well, give yourself another month or year or whatever, however long it takes to meet that goal. So then that way it continues, and you're not beating yourself up about, well, I didn't meet the goal, you know, type thing. It keeps you motivated when you see your progress. So important. All right. So that's the finish of the PowerPoint presentation. So I've put on here the references and resources from Athletics and Fitness Association of America. That's where this content came from. And there's several different books that I referenced here, and I can send those to you if you'd like. And I will get out of this and stop sharing my screen so you can give me any feedback or questions that you have.
Marty, in the beginning, you said you had that commitment level assessment.
Yes.
And I'd like to have that passed on, if you wouldn't mind.
I will definitely do that. Yes, sir, Patrick.
Will you email that?
I can, absolutely. I can just email it out to the 21-day group. Yes, ma'am.
There you go.
And those references at the end of each of your talks, that would be handy too.
Sure, absolutely. I can even share the PowerPoints if you want, just, you know, so you have the content. That's easy. It's on Google, so I can just share it and you guys can look at it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
I'm very bad at making a list of anything.
Oh, really? Why is that?
I never have time to go through it.
Oh,
I make a list and then it takes me days, sometimes weeks to get back to it. So, and my life is quite unusual, which doesn't help any. but it works great. So I'm not complaining, let me tell you that. But what you said today about writing things down,
Mhm.
pros and cons, and not beating yourself up when you don't reach it the way you want to. That's been kind of a problem with one thing in my life lately. And I just haven't had the time for it. Other things come in the way that were more important. So you put that aside. But I think the points you put together were very good, especially for someone that doesn't make lists.
Right.
So I think it will make things probably as things settle down in my life, which I hope will someday. But it'll help a lot to maybe organize things a little bit better and to really reach that goal on a couple of things that I would like to do or like to have. So I really appreciate that. And since this is being recorded and we're getting it back, I'm going to take my time and just go bit by bit through it when I have it. And I think it's going to be a really good thing for me to use in the very near future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy.
No, I thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Marni, a
Yes.
question. So when you take on a big project, you know, I say it's getting ready to send your stuff to your accountant for taxes. It brings in a big time urgent, maybe not time urgent, but a big time consuming project per
Right.
se. I've always found, okay, how do you suggest the balancing act of introducing this? Like, you know, I've been working on hiring somebody and I had to vent a whole set of things to get done, and integrating all of that in with the normal and the everyday. Any comments, any suggestions from that?
Right. I know that's challenging.
How do you put, you know, you put this project together on top of everything else you were doing? How did you integrate it?
Right. Right. Oh, I know. It's definitely a challenge. For me, I work off of a planner. I'm old school and I write it in a planner. And I write down a certain amount of time that I would devote to that particular project. And when that time is up, then I move on to the next, whatever it is on the list. You know, prioritizing, obviously, you know, your priority is to hire somebody, and then, you know, your taxes, you don't want government coming after you, so you need to do the taxes. So, you know, prioritizing obviously isn't the issue. It's more, you know, time management, where you have to be disciplined in the time that you spend on certain projects, and only spend that much time. Because I know with Zach and I, for instance, when we did this challenge, the special content call was something he added to my plate. So that was something that I was like, oh, okay. So again, I had to, you know, set aside that certain amount of time per day to say, okay, I'm going to sit down at the computer. I'm going to make sure that I get my content in there. And if I'm not done with it, I walk away and I go work on something else, because I have actually had something else come up as well. You know, something that I'm doing, it's called item writing and review meetings. And so that's something else that I've kind of added to my plate. So it's, you know, it is a challenge, and we all deal with it differently, and we all are able to handle it differently. But at the end of the day, I think it's, you know, important from a time management standpoint to just do a little bit at a time. That's, you know, that's worked for me. So.
Well, I used to practice law, and you were always, things kept happening, and some they would happen totally, you know, I mean, you just kept interrupting yourself to interrupt yourself to add some urgency over and over and over again. It becomes a habit. So.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that, you know, if you're used to that sort of environment, then that's probably what your default is. That's probably what you go back to. And I know that Whitney had said in her talk that it takes you 20 minutes to come back to, you know, your project, whatever it is that you got distracted from. That we really can't multitask. It's not, you know, something that our brain can do. And so that's, you know, that's the thing that that really spoke to me. It was like, wow, I really need to not get distracted to be able to be as you know, make sure the distractions are out of the way so that you can focus on whatever it is for that hour or whatever it is that you've set aside. You know, turn off the phone, turn off, you know, whatever it is that's the distraction, put the pets out. And that definitely makes a big difference, and it helps in the process.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Something, I guess my basic strategy that I use, trying to balance, you know, find that balance between all the things there seems like there are to do, and like getting things done in a way that makes me feel like I'm actually getting things done, as opposed to just like cut off one head and two more grow.
Yeah.
So I kind of, you know, I kind of have the always expanding running like list, like long list, you know, with categories of this project, this one, and there's things coming in my head. I'm like, oh, I got to do that. I got to do that. I just, you know, I add to it, but I kind of keep it over there. I'm not like looking at that list all day, maybe even daily, really. I just, off of that, you know, every day or every few days, I'm listing the 1, 2, or 3 things that I need to focus on right now. And then so that's my focus for today. Maybe it's just one thing. And if it is, or if I try not to make it more than 3 things that I really need to give a lot of focus to today. If I get to more than that because I have time and energy, that's great. But and that way, you know, it's a lot easier to feel like I'm making progress, because it's like I did what was most important today, and it was this 1 or 2 things, as opposed to just always looking at this big list, and it's like, oh, I'm not making any progress ever. And I used to feel that way a lot, and I would say that simple little shift from, you know, over to a priority list of the top 1, 2, or 3 things for the day, and just referencing the master list when necessary, really helped me get to a much better place with feeling not as constantly like I'm just swimming upstream. Are you talking, Alejandro? Alejandro, I see your hand waving and your mouth moving, but we can't hear you. Maybe I can unmute you. I'm not sure if you want to talk or not. Sometimes I can't unmute you. See, it says you're not muted, but I still can't hear you. Can you guys hear Alejandro?
No.
Yeah.
No.
You good?
You muted again. There you went.
Yeah, he's coming off mute, but we're not able to hear for whatever reason.
Try the sound. Turn the sound up.
Well,
His sound, maybe.
well, that's just sound on his computer, right? I
Yeah.
don't know if it's sound on his speakers or his microphone. It might be a microphone setting on your computer, Alejandro, that you have to adjust. Not sure. You can type in the chat if you care to. That would be fun. Anybody
I'm
else have
getting
any?
some computer lessons too while I'm on this.
Yeah, right.
Really am. Something is always going on, and then one of you said, "Oh, we can do this," or somebody said, "Oh, you do this." I'm still learning every day. It's amazing.
Well, it's always changing too, so that's, you know, we can't keep up.
If I didn't have my granddaughter here or my grandson, I'd be in so much trouble.
I know I miss my daughter, so yeah, I know what you mean.
It helps, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I so agree.
Hey guys, this is Captain Snuggle Mints.
Oh,
Cute.
Cute.
and
Hi.
his sister Raja.
Raja's beautiful.
They are gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
They are so much fun, so sweet. So does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Well, I do.
Okay.
So it's moving on though, and whoever mentioned about computer lessons, I have a question. So on the playlist, when I go into YouTube under Asheville medical massage, and then that's where all the stuff is, right?
Yes and no. It's all there, but it's not all listed. If you're going there just to see what's public, you're not going to see this playlist.
So, okay, well that
You have to use that link that I emailed you because I'm making it right now only available to people in our program. So you have to use the link that I give you. It's not listed under for anybody to see that doesn't have the link.
All right, so I have to save that link.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or save the email or save the link.
All right, that answers my question.
All right.
I am grateful for all the time that you guys give, the enormous effort you put behind everything from the classes to the afternoons and everything else, the teaching. It's really much more than I ever expected, than I thought would happen, but it's been very good. It really has. It's quite a learning experience. You guys are doing this pretty much for free, and that to me, it just blows my mind. You are heroes. You know, when on TV, when it always comes up, everybody's hero there and there. You guys are heroes. Really, I mean it.
Thank you, Inga.
Thank you, Inga. That's very kind. It's for me, it's been a labor of love. It is. I'm really enjoying it. But
Same. I agree.
So is this the last week, period?
Yes, this is the last week, period, comma. I mean, I don't have anything yet. Like, there's nothing yet lined up to say, oh, well, if you want to, now you can just transition into this thing. But we'll be looking at future offerings of this type. And one of the things that we want to do at the end of the program, and partly, I mean, we can even talk a few minutes about it now if anybody has anything to say, but I was thinking particularly on Friday, for those who can come, which is like our wrap-up call, I wanted to just get feedback from you guys on any ideas, programs, of topics you might be interested in the future. Like, this was kind of broad, like we chose 4 different categories and all these different things you might do, you know, in a given category. But so a future one would probably be, and I'm just going to stop the recording now. Hold on one sec.